my God. Oh my God.
You just nailed the baby.
The 2000s were undoubtedly the golden age for comedy movies. But what would the decade look like without Todd Phillips? Todd didn't just make some of the greatest comedy movies of all time, he also gave a voice to some of the funniest writers and brought us some of the most iconic comedy actors. But what could make a director so special? For Todd, a lot of it happens before the cameras even roll, including one final reason that not only transcends genre, but will fundamentally change the way you look at Todd and directors in general. Reason number one, I learned firsthand about Todd's insane attention to detail by sitting down to chat with Jared Scott Mercier, who was on the crew of The Hangover Part 3. Todd was not happy at all with how the opening prison riot scene was choreographed. You know, Jared told me that Todd was at a different location while the scene was getting prepped, and essentially just what was going on was they were just choreographing the fight aspects of the scene. When it came to it, when Todd saw the finished product of what they were rehearsing, it was like expert level fighting, martial arts types. Todd just pointed out how they got it all wrong. These were supposed to be peasants in a Thailand prison. They looked like black belts. They ended up completely re-choreographing the scene to make it a lot messier and a lot more realistic. But a little aspect like that is just not something that the average director is going to pick up on, but it really makes a world of difference. It's one of those things that if you were watching the movie, subconsciously would probably know something was off, but you wouldn't be able to put your finger on it. But his attention to detail clearly carries over to the nuances to directing a comedy movie. I mean, when you're watching a scene in his movies, you never get the vibe in his movies where there's a scene where he just settled and said, this is good enough, or this is funny enough. He really goes for it in every scene, and it really shows.
There was a whore in Las Vegas a couple of years ago.
A big reason why his movies are so funny is really the line-by-line dialogue and just the casual conversations that the characters have. Whether it's an Old School or Starsky and Hutch or even The Hangover, I valued the dialogue in his movies way over the set pieces. It's very clear that he puts every scene under a microscope and he doesn't move on until it's perfect.
Actually, I gave this to you for your wedding.
But what's something you just never see when a comedy movie tries to merge genres? Think of The Lost City or Glass Onion or The Menu. I actually enjoyed all of these movies, but they just completely forgot to be funny despite being billed as a comedy. But Todd specializes in this. I mean, look at Starsky and Hutch. It's a crime comedy. Or The Hangover, which is a mystery comedy. Or even The Hangover Part 3, which is a thriller comedy. And I mean, these are some of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Todd is literally the only director on earth that I trust to merge genres with comedy and actually be funny in the end.
Well, do me a favor, don't text me, okay?
And how many directors are just straight up carried by their cast? I mean, let's be honest, when you're deciding what movie to watch, most of the time the director is just an afterthought. But with Todd, it literally doesn't matter who is in the cast. You know damn well the movie is going to be both very funny and just an overall great movie. Look at Road Trip. We've got Sean William Scott, Old School, Vince Vaughn, Starsky and Hutch, Ben Stiller, The Hangover, Zach Galifianakis. And he's so uniquely talented at finding what his actors are best at and milking it for everything they've got. Todd's just one of those directors where you really don't care who's in the cast because you know no matter what, he's gonna get A+ performances from everyone.
I found your 99, bitch.
But what if I told you the most prominent comedy movie of the 21st century was shot in roughly 1/5 the time of the average Hollywood hit? Yes, The Hangover was shot in roughly the same amount of time as both of my micro-budget indie features. But you'd never know it because The Hangover is literally one of the greatest comedy movies of all time. But it's not just the quick shoot times. I mean, he's well equipped to work within any budget. As with his comedies, he's worked with as low as $16 million with Road Trip and as much as $103 million with The Hangover Part 3. And you just don't notice these differences in budget at all. I mean, they all generally have the same sort of production quality. On average, I tend to prefer his lower budgeted films over his higher budgeted films.
It's supposed to be a challenge. That's why they call it a shortcut. If it was easy, it would just be the way.
But regardless of the budget or shoot time, you know you're always going to be in for a treat when Todd is behind the camera. What's the number one thing that separates a great comedy movie set from other genres? You absolutely cannot have an uptight set when you're shooting a comedy movie. So it should come as no surprise that Todd has some of the loosest sets around. He often refers to his sets as the inmates are running the asylum. And this on-set dynamic is very much reflected in the masterpieces of loose performances that his actors put on.
Happy bat mitzvah, baby. I love you.
And did you know that Zach Galifianakis was a complete no-name before The Hangover? Bradley and Ed weren't big stars either. Sean William Scott was not the big-name comedy icon that he was when he was cast in Road Trip. Vince also was not the fast-talking comedy legend before Old School. Todd has just one of the best eyes for talent in the industry. He can spot a funny actor from a mile away.
Unleash the fury, Mitch.
But it's not just the actors that he has a great eye for. He routinely makes Grand Slam hires in the writing department as well. Scott Armstrong, his most frequent collaborator, co-wrote Road Trip, Old School, Starsky and Hutch, and The Hangover Part 2 with him. Scott Moore and John Lucas wrote the original script for The Hangover, which Todd would go back and rewrite and polish, but Scott and John have gone on to be some of the funniest writers in the industry. And then Craig Mazin co-wrote The Hangover Part 2 and The Hangover Part 3 with Todd as well. All three of these writers have been outstanding collaborators, and I cannot tell you how hard it is to find an actually funny writer. Out of the phases of a comedy movie, when we have the writers, the directors, the producers, the actors, by far the hardest to come by are the writers. But what's the single greatest thing currently plaguing comedy movies? Writing a joke should not be rocket science. But it seems like nowadays, virtually everyone from the writers on up to the executives are trying to galaxy brain the shit out of comedy, and it just ends up being a mess and not working. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, Todd plays off of people and situations that we all know and can universally relate to in order to drive the humor, and it works unlike any other writer-director. Whether it's going on an adventure with your best friends, getting stuck teamed up with that unbearable coworker, or accidentally giving that gift you rewrapped to the person who initially gave it to you, Todd takes us to familiar places and wins as a result. What do the greatest comedic minds across all mediums have in common? Whether it's the greatest comedic television writer of all time in Seth MacFarlane, or the greatest stand-up comedians in Dave Chappelle and George Carlin, the greatest comedic minds do not tell you what you can and can't joke about, and are unafraid to push any boundaries they see fit. And the same is true for Todd. Think of literally any boundary that Hollywood will tell you that you cannot cross, and I guarantee he's crossed it. And that's beautiful because it's honest.
He practically bankrupt a casino, and he was a retard. What? He was a retard.
Instead of pretending that unpleasant people don't exist and turning his movies into Marvel movies, he taps into humanity and he makes light of it. And really, the honesty, authenticity, and overall you to political correctness has really cemented Todd's legacy. And how does Todd Phillips transcend genre? The guy just loves movies and the filmmaking process as a whole. In order to make sure that his first documentary titled Hated could get made, he took it upon himself to self-finance it by maxing out a credit card. Then 16 years later, he took an insane pay cut just to make sure that The Hangover could get made. It's always been about making just the overall best movie he can make and just an overall love for film. And he's even preached about it in interviews he's done. I mean, he's frequently brought up the fact that he loves working with Warner Brothers because they are so friendly to filmmakers and that they will give them the resources and freedom to make sure that they make the movie that is the vision that they had. He's even self-critical and points to Road Trip as being a very amateur movie, and he called it a TV movie rather than a film, and has expressed his desire to just continuously grow as a filmmaker. I don't care what genre you're in, if you're prioritizing making the best movie possible over money, genuinely love the art, and don't just view it as a paycheck, you are a very special director and hard to come by. As you can see, Todd Phillips is truly one of a kind. But what happens when you stack him up against Judd Apatow, the director of The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and This Is 40? I take a deep dive into which director deserves to be crowned the king of comedy movies here.